Welcome to the Savvy Property Investors Podcast, a weekly show that delivers the best hard-hitting property industry news, business advice, and talks that will get you ascending in the real estate industry. Now, here's your host, the amazing award-winning property and business coach, best-selling author, and serial entrepreneur, Miss Sapphire Gray.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Property Investors Show. This is a show for newbies and seasoned property investors, coaches, consultants, and even trainers who want to become savvy investors and build a legacy for you and your loved ones. My name is Sapphire Gray, and I'm your host. Every week, we bring you different episodes talking about property investment and various business topics on how you can grow as an expert in business. Sometimes we interview clients so you can learn from them. And we also bring on expert speakers from the property or business world. Today, we're going to be talking about Doc getting high on property trip. But before I introduce our guest, I want to remind you of a couple of things. If you're new to our podcast, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any episodes. If you haven't downloaded the Investors Property Toolkit, please make sure you do that now. You know that following in the footsteps of someone that has already created wealth through property and business is the way to learn. Maybe you've struggled with what strategies you should start with, or struggled with to find the right below market value properties. Whatever your issues is, there's something you can do about it right now. A Property Investors Toolkit is what we created so that you can have a profitable property business that will continuously bring you the rewards you deserve. So check it out for £37. The website is savvywomen.co.uk. Again, that's the savvywomen.co.uk. And if you scroll down in our show notes, you'll find the link to this wonderful offer. Or if you're watching from YouTube or any other social media platform, you'll find the links in the comments. It's now time to introduce our guest. Our guest today is Dr. Rao. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Sapphire. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak here.
Brilliant. So let's get to know Doctor. He's been a senior NHS consultant in Sheffield Children's Hospital for over 10 years and have expertise worldwide as an expert paediatric gastroenterologist as well. He's well published in the academia world and developed an international reputation in his field. He specializes in diagnostic and therapeutic modalities, which people from all over the world come to him in Sheffield to get trained. He's held a senior management position in the NHS too, and then used midlife crisis at 40 to do a deep dive into the property and learn all about it. In the first 2 years, he learned how to make a few mistakes, as we all do. But he had a low risk appetite as a doctor, and that meant he didn't make many. He could use the Burr model for HMOs in Sheffield to recycle cash quickly to acquire assets. He then went on to use the pandemic time isolation at home to really grow his knowledge and make new contacts and educate more people around his virtual media. This has not only led to multiple joint ventures in which he now is providing a turnkey solution, sweat equity, as he's put it here, to enable a lot of partners to buy, refurbish, refinance, and rent properties for high yields for JV partners across the country. Most of them are doctors. So I'm your host, Sapphire Gray. Let's get started, Dr. O. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. And I can see that you've come in as a novice property investor and have grown your skills over the 2 years that we've been in lockdown and been able to really transition into a property investor and really able to build out your portfolio. So, kudos to you and well done for doing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sapphire. That's very kind of you to say that.
You're welcome. You know, one of the things that a lot of people have sort of reservations about is should I go into something? Should I do something like do property investment? So why did you get into property investment?
My initial foray into property was as an accidental landlord. We relocated from a city in the north to
Mhm,
Sheffield, and this was just post the last recession. We couldn't sell our house there, so I became a default landlord because I couldn't sell my property up there. So I had a taste for property then. And
mhm,
then, as you alluded to, when midlife crisis hit me about 3 years back, I
mhm,
started researching different domains to try and explore um, investment possibilities. And I looked at different asset classes. I looked at jewelry, stocks, shares, but I found that actually over the long run, one of the best asset classes to stay invested in, particularly if you're not looking to get in and get out very quickly,
okay,
is property. So when I did that research, I spent a good 6 months of my time and used my research background in my medicine career to drill into the nitty gritties of what works and what doesn't work. And when I did that research, it was really property that I realized was the biggest asset class that would give you rewards over a long period of time.
yeah,
I then made sure, that I acquired all the right kind of information and then translated theoretical knowledge into practice by doing a deep dive and jumping in with a auction property right as my first purchase. And I learned a lot, from that. You mentioned that, I learned from my mistakes. I certainly made quite a few right at the right at the outset. The only analogy I can give as a pediatrician is a child learning to fall very many times before they can actually learn to toddle or walk.
yeah,
Uh,
true.
so no different. My journey also was exactly like that.
And the thing about it, the way you've researched, because I think your medical background has really given you that kind of stepping stone as well. Because when you're in studying your obviously your medical exam, you have to go deep into the research. And I've always been sort of an advocate for doing your due diligence, doing your research into something that you're wanting to go into. But even with all the research in the world, I've even made mistakes. With even all of that, we still make the mistakes. But I think it's about learning from them as well, because I think we need to sometimes make those mistakes to say, okay, I've done that. So how do I not do that again? And how do I improve on that? So have you learned so far with these mistakes that you wouldn't like to repeat? What is your highs and lows?
So the mistakes that the biggest mistake I made was I thought going and attending a few auctions, property auctions, and reading up about it would be sufficient information. So the first biggest mistake I made was when I went and purchased my first HMO. I had bridging finance in place. I put down the 10% deposit. But when the bridging finance company sent their valuer, they saw a small crack in the property and they just deemed the property to be,
Oh no,
very, very high risk,
yeah, yeah.
and they wouldn't give me the money, and I risked losing 10% at the time. I think that purchase price was 160,000, and for me 16,000 was a lot of money.
Hmm.
So, I mean, still is, but
Hmm.
what I meant was I then had to literally knock on the doors of friends, family, liquidate, any liquid assets that I had to be able to be in a position to complete. So if I had to go back in time, one of the mistakes that perhaps I should not have made is not gone in for an auction purchase. I think auction properties are inherently quite risky.
Yeah.
So if I had to go back and change something, I would change that. But actually, funnily enough, I wouldn't change that because my father used to say that if you have a plan, that's great. But if you don't have a plan, then forces of nature have got a better plan for you.
Yeah.
And it turns out that actually, because I went and knocked on the door of all of my friends and they loaned me the money, within 2 months after I could get the property up to scratch, I was in a position to repay their money back with interest, and these ended up becoming my future joint venture partners.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
so that allowed me to, really.
There. There's always definitely a blessing in there. And the one thing I always say to people, when you're looking at auction properties, despite there is a higher risk, it's always to walk with a builder if you can. Somebody that has got a keen eye to look at the property that you're trying to invest in or purchase at auction. And it's worth them coming out and saying, like, I'll pay a little fee to come and view this property, because then that crap may have been discovered by so you could have rounded up your money beforehand. But everything done in hindsight, so to speak. You know, we
No,
always
actually, interestingly, Safa, I did go with two builders, not one, with two with two builders. Remember, I told you my appetite for risk is very, very low. But there was a crack which both of them felt was a non-structural
superficial.
crack,
Yeah,
superficial.
yeah,
When this valuer went there, he I mean, I think you know what it is, in the industry. One assessor's opinion differs significantly
true.
different from that of the other, but I got the short end of the stick, and unfortunately, in that situation,
Yeah.
it was a report that didn't let me get the money in time from the bridging loan company.
Well, that's a good thing that you did have sort of friends and family to rely on for that instance. And I've known many instances that people haven't. We had a colossal catastrophe, and I learned my biggest lesson was paying out for builders pre-work being done, and gave them the money, and they literally ran off and smiled at us. And then when we researched them, there were so many people that were after them. We just fell down in like a line of 20, 30 people. Advise to not
Yeah.
pay money up front, make sure that they're doing the work, make sure you wrap it up in contracts and everything else. So yeah, there's lessons throughout the property, but it's not deterred yourself, and it's not deterred me.
No, no,
um,
no, not at all. And I would say actually getting to the low was a good starting point in my journey,
yeah,
because once you hit rock bottom,
you
the,
can
the good thing about that is you can only really go up from there. And actually the high was to be able to repay the money back to some of my friends and family
yeah,
with interest,
excellent.
because they were on sitting on a passive amount of money which wasn't working hard enough for them,
Hmm.
and they were able to realize that maybe this guy is on to something here. He seems to have developed the knowledge or the tact, or the expertise or the network to be able to slowly take on these kinds of properties,
Hmm.
add a lot of love into them, and then get some of that love from the property and repay it back to them. So the low and high, if you like, was the same example.
Well, that's the beauty of it, because everything's based on know, like, and trust. So they already knew you, they already liked you. Now they're trusting you to give them a return from their money, or even just to pay back their money is a trust thing. Even if you
Correct.
didn't give them something on top of that, just the fact that you paid back, that's built the trust with them. So that goes nicely into, why do you feel that doing joint ventures are the way forward?
I just feel now, for example, this conversation that you and me are having, you
Mm,
have two X chromosome. I happen to have 50% of your knowledge and skill, because I only have one X chromosome. I realize I'm on a Savvy Women show, but my Y chromosome brings in something different. I
that's
feel
right.
in any joint venture, two or three heads are better than one.
True.
And so if somebody brings in, let's say, the capital, another person can bring the knowledge, or as I class it, the sweat equity.
Hmm.
um, but equally, if both of them are putting equal amount of capital, it may be that the perspectives that one person can appreciate, the
Mm,
other person may not be able to. So it's important to make sure we get the right mix of people in any joint venture. And also, I would say the resilience capacity. Right now we are in a boom, but who's to say, thanks to what's happening in the world right now,
mhm,
in a year's time or 2 years time, there isn't another crash that might come. If there are three or four people who can absorb that
mhm,
crash, or that shock from that crash,
mhm.
it just means that you can sustain yourself in the long run.
Yes.
So I believe there are a whole lot of people out there who have the knowledge, experts like yourself,
Hmm.
who have the expertise. What they really need is someone who can bring in the capital.
Hmm.
Equally, there may be people who have the capital, but they just don't know where to find these people who are credible, who are trustworthy, and who can bring in expertise.
Yeah.
So I think that marriage between the two is what leads to a successful joint venture. And I certainly believe that's the way forward for a sophisticated property industry.
Excellent. So what really excites you about property? I mean, you said that it was the best asset class for you to get into, but what excites you about it?
If I may, if I may borrow the general medicine analogy in my field, for example, when I got into pediatrics,
Mhm.
I didn't realize. I just thought pediatrics was looking after children who are unwell. But within pediatrics, there are very niche subspecialized domains
Mhm.
like surgery, like ear, nose, and throat, like eyes, heart, liver, so on and so forth. In property as well, the exciting thing is there are so many different domains within it. You
Mhm.
have the vanilla buy to lets, you have serviced accommodation, you have LHA housing type properties,
Mhm.
you have commercial properties, you have HMOs,
Mhm.
you have industrial sized properties. And so you can pick whichever model you think you've got most traction, knowledge, or expertise in, and dive into that if you wanted to.
True.
And I have kind of dived a little bit into everything, so I've kind of got a taste for it. So I would say I'm at the starter course of the 7 course
I was going
menu.
to say that you're on. You're on the
Yes, so
start of
I'm rubbing my hands for the
Yeah.
main course now, so so that's what excites me about property, the fact
Nice.
that you can make it a win-win-win proposition. If I may give you an example,
Mhm.
uh, we my builder is of Romanian origin, and he's got a big family.
Mhm.
Now, what we did was I asked him to look for a house that he thought was suitable for him,
Nice.
and he suggested one which was at an auction. We purchased it at auction for 70,000. He added value to it, to the value. He just needed some capital from me for about 15,000. So that's
Mhm.
85,000 spent. Because he added two more bedrooms and an ensuite into that property, he's made it into a 5 bedroom, 2 bathroom property, which is
Wow.
now valued at 130,000.
Lovely.
I could release my equity. I could then tell him, you can stay there and you can go on a rent to buy contract, so that in 5 years' time, this home where you have put in
Brilliant.
all your money, you will go on to own it. And here,
That's brilliant.
it's a good example of kind of, it can be win-win-win for everyone concerned.
Absolutely. That's an absolutely brilliant model, and kudos to you to doing that as well. And I think more people need to be like, have your energy one, but be able to give somebody else another step up in life to say, hey, here's a property in 10 years time, just pay for it, and we're square on it. That's brilliant. I love that. And as you said, there's a little buffet pieces, appetizers that we all get into. I mean, I love my buy to lets, my regular vanilla single lets, semi-detached. I get into that a lot, but I love flipping. I like taking a property and turning it around. I go in there physically myself and rip out the property. That is my joy. I love flipping properties. I've always done that. I've always enjoyed doing that. HMOs I've gone into, service accommodations as well. And the co-living now, the flipping
Yeah.
from HMO to co-living, and these are the different things. And when you talk about industrial, it's doing dark kitchens as well, having a massive place where you can rent out different spaces within that factory as dark kitchens, so people can come in there, prep foods, and then send out their delicious delights to other people, but from a place that wouldn't normally be seen as a kitchen. That's coming. That's a new strategy that's coming as well. So there's loads of things that you can actually do in the property space, and people are not aware of this. But it's only when you start to learn, you realize what you've got a flavor for, what you really like doing, and you'd always have a number one favorite. Mine is flipping.
Yeah.
I do like my single lets as well. But you get the appetite for it, and then you move yourself and start to really push out your portfolio, which would then bring you regular income. And that's what it's about, is understanding what you're really good at, become proficient in it, and then the world's your oyster. You can do whatever you want from there, because that's your springboard to learning more different strategies. Brilliant. How does managing your success navigate with family life, being a doctor, and running your property business?
Yeah, it's a constant challenge. I wish I had 48 hours in a day, uh, but we only have a finite amount of time. And actually,
Yes.
my wife and I, we're relatively young still, and
Hmm.
we have a young family. Um, so I'm sure everyone's got the same story, taking them to these classes, those classes, and but my wife and I are now pursuing music as an interest, and we pursue sport as well at a professional level. I play badminton, for the leagues. Um, so I think it's a real challenge. But what I've now learned is how you can leverage your time
Mm.
by kind of categorizing your time into three categories: urgent and important,
Hmm.
urgent, important, and then that fourth category, which is not urgent or not important, not to be touched.
Yeah.
And I only concentrate on the urgent and important stuff, and I
Mhm.
use virtual assistants to help me with that. I have an operations manager now in my company. I have a very, very good network of letting agents. I've been very careful in who I choose for HMOs, for vanilla buy to lets, such that it's completely hands off, and I've got systems that I've put in place to enable them to exercise a decision, even if it's a wrong one, so that
Mm.
they don't call me and trouble me with that leaky tap, or
Yes.
or a door not opening. I've put kind of systems in place so that I
Yeah.
don't get troubled, and those 5 minutes, 10
That's
10 minutes here and there, all put together makes a lot of time. So I try to get that balance right.
right. Hmm.
And this is along with managing a very busy NHS job. I'm still working at the Children's Hospital. I'm very specialized in what I do. So 3 days a week is still dedicated to my NHS work, which I thoroughly enjoy and love. So I don't want to give that up
Yeah.
as well. So while there's a pull from the property side of things, I've got systems and teams that I've put in place to make sure that that can be balanced. So I'm still, that's it's a constant juggle, but that's the exciting bit about it.
And that's why I really wanted to interview you today, because the one thing that I admire about you is the fact that you have all these systems in place and you're still employed at something that you love doing. And a lot of people feel that they need to give up what they love doing.
Mm,
If you enjoy your job, why are you going to give it up for doing your other side business, which you can have, which you've done successfully? Put the systems in place so that it doesn't encroach on your actual profession where you're really loving and enjoying, and it doesn't affect your family as well. There is a definite balance there, and you've managed to navigate that so well. And I mean, that's why I said, I think you would really be good to show people that. Always telling people, don't give up what you love.
yeah,
You can do it, and you can do it successfully. You just need to plan it out well, and execute it well as well. And I know
yeah,
that you spend time with your family, because a couple of times you said you've got holiday, you're doing all different things with the family. So
yes, yes,
I know that balance is definitely there. And I'm always an advocate for not wearing too many hats. And you've said, I've got VAs in place, I've got a system in place. You don't want to be disturbed with a leaky tap. So you've got people that manage your property, and you then can concentrate on what you actually, desire, and which is working at your NHS job, which you've worked and got the qualifications and are well renowned for it as well. So why give that up, So
and
kudos.
actually, I also, Sophia, I feel there is some degree of transference of skills
True,
from one sector to another.
true.
As a doctor, I brought in my low risk appetite, and my research knowledge allowed me to do the due diligence that is required
Mm,
when you take on any project. So I brought those kinds of skills from there. But equally, systemization, which I've instituted in my property business, and putting systems in place to reduce errors,
mm.
and to allow decision making to take place more quickly, are skills which I've, in a sense, transferred back to my NHS job as well.
That's very true.
So there is a joy in actually being able to learn new things and transfer them from one side to the other. So I
Yeah.
think, like you said, there's a true value in trying to do something
Mm.
like that.
And not only that, it's all those learnt skills, as you said, transferable skills that you would do have. people don't realize how much skills they actually have until they start to do something. And I've always applauded people when I think, you've got all these skills, you can reutilize them. You don't have to go out and learn it from scratch. You just have to know, well, what will go with that? And it's like, as my kids will say, snap, pairings, a skill pairing something
Yes.
together. I'm fortunate to have older children, so I don't have bubbies anymore. So I can really concentrate solely on the business. But
Yes.
I know there's a lot of parents out there trying to juggle doing property investment, doing a job, and being a parent as well. So, as I said, I've always been proud of people that can do all of those and navigate it well, especially when you're involved in. I know there's lots of activities that children do nowadays, and still being able to be involved in that. But as you said, you have to look at what is important, what is urgent, what is important to you at that time, and leave the ones that are unimportant. They're not relevant. So concentrate on what is in front of you. Thank you so much so far. So join us after the break with more insights.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button below. Our podcast is only made possible by great listeners like you.
Welcome back, Dr. Rowe. Thank you so much for sharing so much insights. We talked about joint ventures, what excites you about property investment, and how you balance your family, being a doctor, and running a property business. So, what is your goal as a property investor?
This might seem like a bizarre answer, and I know almost everyone says that you need to have like a strategy and a clear financial goal. Uh, as you must have realized by now, I was already on a comfortable job at a comfortable salary. So
Mhm.
my motivation or my drive to get into property was not necessarily a financial one. It was to try and find a challenge and something new to do. So I'm going to give you a very loose answer and say my goal is to keep remaining excited with whatever I do. And so the day I get saturated or I get satisfied with what I'm doing, I might find myself that next new challenge to take up. So I've done vanilla buy to lets. I got a bit bored with that. So then we went on to HMOs and co-living, and I've done that now. I'm now beginning to do a lot more commercial stuff and very large sized multi units.
Mhm.
And in parallel, I love the buy, refurbish, and refinance. There is an amazing joy in buying an ugly duckling and
Yes.
then converting it into a golden swan. Uh, so as long as I keep getting that joy, I
Mhm.
plan to carry on. So I don't have a finite number. I don't have a financial goal as such. And in that journey, I'm actually going to take along with me my friends, my family, my extended network, and hopefully, touchwood, make sure everyone has a wealth base such that when I conk off in a few years' time or in a couple of decades' time, who knows,
Yeah.
I'll be remembered hopefully for the right reasons.
And that's the thing as well. Just touching on that generational wealth. We've got kids.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that I'm leaving that legacy behind, that they continue in the how mum continued, how mum done it. I want them to continue, not just when they get my will, when I do pop the clogs, you know,
yeah,
just sell off every asset. I want them to continue on the same thread so that they can pass it down to their kids and so on. So that they can look back and say, our great whoever created this for us, and that is how legacies are built. That's how generational wealth is built. And not a lot of people are educated on how do you successfully do that. It's
or you'd be surprised, Safa, when the pandemic started. I unfortunately had a friend who succumbed to COVID,
Mm,
and he was a senior NHS consultant, and when he did, his family couldn't have access to his wealth because he was on a ventilator for a very long period of time,
mm,
and no one seemed to know about lasting powers of attorney, about will writing, about creation of trusts.
yeah,
And when I then started asking the question in my wider community whether they knew about LPOAs or wills or trust planning, or thinking of all
Yeah.
three parts of the wealth wheel, I was shocked that actually hardly anyone, including us in the doctor community who sometimes sign on those lasting powers
Yeah.
of attorney. The doctors can be the worst patients. It was
Yeah.
pretty much an example of that. So actually, when I started those webinars, which I was telling you about, the educational webinars, the intent behind that was genuinely to educate people, and I invited people who are experts in trust planning, in will writing, in LPOAs, to come and talk to a wider community
Yeah.
about why these things are important and why do you need to structure it. And that then led to the birth of a property network, so to speak. But the
Yeah.
original intention was that people just don't know, and they
Yeah.
need to really educate themselves about it.
And, and sorry for your friend's loss, but that is the key to all of us. What's the purpose of doing property investment if we could pass at any time? We've seen it over the last 2 years. Life is you can't predict what's going to happen 1 minute to the next. But if you don't have a system in place that your children, your loved ones can say, right, I know exactly what to do, because mum or dad left this and we know what we're doing, we've got it all signed off, then who does know? And we are the worst types because we think, oh yeah, we've got time. And that is the thing that is fooling a lot of people. We need to come out of that kind of thinking now and think, no, act today, start investigating it today, start looking into how do you protect your wealth so your loved ones are not going to suffer in the long run. And I've always had this butt joke of, I don't want a GoFundMe for my funeral. I don't want someone to put up a GoFund page and say, I've got to pay for her funeral because we can't afford it. I want all of that. And I've meticulously planned my will, everything around what I do. I've meticulously planned it. So there's no burden on my children when that time comes for me, and it's just what you're doing now is wonderful because you're educating people, saying, hey, look into this. Even if they don't do anything, at least you can consciously say, I've given you enough tools to go off with, to look into it. It's now up to you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And actually, a lot of my friends and family, etc., did take it on board. It was like a shock when they realized that what are the mechanisms by which the state can take over all that wealth you've created, all your
Okay.
hard-earned sweat, toil,
Yeah,
etc., just in a minute can just be
absolutely.
taken away, or a big chunk of it can be taken away.
And they will definitely do that with rubbing hands as well. So I always say, if you don't want to give away your money to the government, please look after it now.
Yes.
So you talked about sort of your buy-to-lets, your vanilla properties was one of your favorite strategies. What is your favorite type now to invest in?
At the moment, I'm actually trying to kill two birds with one stone. I'm ticking two boxes. I'm kind of buying HMOs, and then adding a specific kind of value to them to make them into large essays,
Okay.
such that there is the ability to pivot and change strategies if the situation demanded it. So
Mm.
during the pandemic, for example, one of my big HMOs wouldn't have ASTs coming in, single ASTs coming in.
Mm.
But what it allowed me to do was we were able to house a lot of doctors and nurses who needed places to stay outside of their home. We
True.
initially did that for free, but then subsequently we were able to get a huge amount of demand, for those kinds of spaces,
Mm.
because you would have doctors working in one unit, let's say five of them, who
Yeah.
are part of the same bubble. And this
That,
then went on to electricians or plumbers, and
yeah.
it meant that we could flexibly change the strategy. So I think
According.
that's the way for the future, because I don't know if there's going to be COVID version 2023 or 2023 or 2024, and buying HMOs which can flexibly be moved around either as an SA or as a HMO, is, I think, a nice strategy to consider.
I
Um,
absolutely agree with that strategy because we've done a HMO where we had some of the rooms that was a service accommodation and majority was a HMO. So we had a mixed house. And the reason why we done that because they in the area there was a high demand for people coming over and wanting to rent a room, but also there was a high demand for the HMO. So we had a split house. So I totally get that strategy that you've used. Does having a good team help your investment journey?
Oh, I think I would say a good team, a good core team, is vital. I mean, the hard graft for me was the first 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
but after that, you can slowly take your foot off the pedal a little bit and go into cruise control mode. So I have a really really solid team. It constitutes builders, handymen. You can't put your, you
No,
can't do your kind of day to day work without having that person, because everyone is so much in demand. It's the small jobs which no one seems to want to do, uh,
true.
and you need your man Friday, who can just go there and sort it out so that the customer, the tenants
Mm-hmm.
are happy. So I have a great power team of mortgage brokers. I've got the rule of two, two,
Mm-hmm.
two for everything. Two brokers, two solicitors,
Yeah.
two estate agents for every style of property, whether it's SA agents or vanilla buy-to-let or HMOs, and try to keep two of each, so that if somebody falls sick, you have kind of a go-to
Backup.
as a
Yeah.
backup
Yeah.
plan for everything. But yeah, I would say it's building that core team is absolutely vital. They are your launch pad into being able to scale up if that is what you intend to do.
Absolutely. And when you say your core team, when you're looking at the building process, how do you, and this is a sort of a throwing question. Your core team consists of builders as well. How do you find your builders and good ones?
So I've been slightly cheeky and I've been slightly lucky. Cheeky in that I got them initially off mybuilder.com, but I gave
Right.
5, 6 of them small projects to do. Out of them, it was really only two who I felt their quality of work was really, really of a good standard to
Mhm.
a decent price. Because it's that, isn't it? The human resource cost is the variable. The material cost and all of that, okay, you can go to LNPG and get your discounts and so on and so forth. There's the human resource cost, which is the biggest. So the Romanian builder that I gave you the example for, I have housed both of my builders
I love that.
such that they don't have to work for me, but they
Mhm.
want to work for me.
Yeah.
And before the start of the project, I tell them this is my budget, and this is what I'm willing to give you as your salary. But are you willing to do it in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks? That is your prerogative.
Hmm.
If you do it at 4 weeks, there is an added bonus of 10%.
Wow.
If you do it at 8 weeks, that 10% bonus comes off, but I will still give you this assured sum of money.
Hmm.
And invariably, that promised sum of money is 10% less than what I'm eventually going to give them, which means I'm going to give them 10% more anyway. But I don't tell them that. And
Yeah.
I hope they don't listen to this podcast. uh, but that's how I've kind of chosen these two teams, and then
Mm.
I've got a schedule of work that I follow as a template for everything,
Yeah.
and I put them all on one WhatsApp group for each project, so each one knows when they need to come in. So they
Yeah.
don't really need project management because they kind of know now what's the schedule of works. The template is set out at the start,
Yeah.
and they have to work it out amongst themselves as to when does the sparky come, when does the plasterer come, when does the plumber come. They kind of talk to each other, and it's kind of hands off management. I don't try to micromanage them too much.
True.
I get one of them to play the role of the project manager. That's typically the builder,
Hmm.
but they all get along very well. I take them out for dinners and things like that, so that
Love that.
that 500 pound dinner bill is worth every penny, because they, after a couple of drinks, really get to know one another, and they're willing to push their timelines back by,
Yeah.
I don't know, a week or
Yeah.
5 days or whatever. So that's the kind of system I've put in place.
I love your system. I have a system similar to that. I do give a bonus. I offer a bonus for the work being done ahead of time, but also get their wives involved. So I
All
also
right, okay.
give flowers and chocolates to their wife, because if I'm taking them away from the home to work night and day, because that's what I'm telling you to do, I have to reward the women in their life to say, hey, I'm taking away your husband, but hey, here's a gift to you. So now the wives now are pushing them out because they want their gifts at the end of the project. So I do those
That's a
rewards.
that's a brilliant idea. Although you're not allowed to call them wives, they could be
No.
same-sex partners,
Oh,
and
yes, true. True, true, true. Absolutely. That's true. So
yeah,
partners, they're partners.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a brilliant idea. I might borrow that idea.
Yeah, and it works, because it makes them energized. I give them the bonus, and we're all working together. We have a laugh, we have lunch together, and things like that. It does make a difference in when you're doing something because you get to know who they are. So if something is going wrong, they feel free enough to come and say, "Hey, we need an extra week on this because this happened," without feeling they have to dodge you or anything like that. And when you
Yeah,
build up that reputation with your builders, I'm telling you, the work just flows really well, communication flows really well, and you just get the job done.
absolutely, absolutely. No, completely agree.
So, what are some top tips for success in property?
Um, Top tips. I don't know if I'm really qualified to give that kind of advice, but I would say one of the absolutely key things is learning about leverage,
Mm,
um, because leverage is what is going to help you in an inflationary market where the asset does all the hard work for you. So having a really good mortgage broker, I would
mhm,
say, is vital. The second top tip I would say is spend the time before you go and do your first purchase to actually kind of get a sense of what is it that you're really getting into. um,
mm,
maybe shadow someone else who's already an established property investor, or go for one of these earn while you learn kind of
mm,
concepts where you joint venture with another senior experienced person. You're actually putting in your money, but you put in your money conditional with the fact that I get to learn things of an experienced property investor.
mhm,
So I would say those two tips are absolutely vital. And the third thing I would say is right from the start, having a cloud-based system to log all your documents, your ID documents, your mortgage documents, your gas safety certificates, etc. I use Evernote, but I know people use Google Drive. But putting all those systems in place first and familiarizing yourself so that it's proactively done rather than kind of suddenly reactively done when you become 0 to 3 properties in a
yeah,
year's time, and then suddenly you don't know what you're doing with all these documents.
so
I would
true.
say those are your kind of top tips to get you kind of started in your property journey.
Absolutely. And you said you're not qualified to give tips. That was definitely some fantastic tips. And just to add to that one as well, when you're looking at getting your finance in place, is to always make sure you get your credit report. So you know there's nothing adverse on there. You're up to date with that. And that way, when you've got your broker asking you for all these details, you've got a fresh report to send over. They're aware of it, and then you can just get your finance in place. And that's leveraging the banks for your business because they will give you up to 75% loan to value on any mortgage. So, and depending on whether you're bridging or doing a mortgage. So always make sure that you've got done your due diligence on that. You've done your decision in principle as well, so that you know where you are financially to go ahead and get into your property investments. Dr. Rowe, thank you so much for your insights. Where can our viewers and listeners get hold of you and you can impart your wisdom with them?
I have a website. I have to say I'm actually relatively social media shy.
Mhm.
I am not very active on the trendy socials, but I have my own website. It's called Wealth Property, but it's wealth as in WELL. How well are you?
Yeah,
Wealth T so wealthproperty.co.uk.
perfect.
Um, if somebody put in my name as Dr. Prithviraj Rao and just put a Sheffield, then my websites etc. come up on there as well, and they might get confused. Who is this guy? He's based in the Children's Hospital. He's there in the private hospital. He's doing so many things. Uh, but invariably, one of those websites will have my secretary's details, and it'll have like an enquiry form.
Mhm.
Uh, so if they wanted to connect with me, they could do it through there. I have a LinkedIn page as well. Again, if you just put Prithviraj Rao and search for me on LinkedIn, Sheffield, then I'll come up there as well. So those are the kind of different mechanisms by which people can get in touch if they wanted to.
Brilliant.
I'm more than happy to share whatever little I know, with whoever wants.
You keep on saying little, but you have done a lot in, you're learning, you're building out your portfolio, you've gone into the commercial space now. So you've actually really achieved a lot. And as I said, kudos to you. Feel really privileged of having you here as our guest as well. It's been an honor, absolute pleasure. And we'll definitely be putting in the website and your LinkedIn details into our show notes. So if you want to head over there when we go live with this, you're able to get all the contact details. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, as I said. And if, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching or listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to rate us, review, download, and share. Thank you so much for being our guest today. It's been absolutely brilliant.
It's been great fun, Sophia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This week's episode of the Savvy Property Investors Podcast was brought to you by our sponsor, the Savvy Women Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to our website, www.savvywomen.co.uk, to gain access to our free resources and more insights about our guest speaker today. Remember, we make your business our business, so you can unlock your full potential and improve your quality of life.